The news rippled across the stars like a shockwave. It wasn't just an announcement. It was a declaration that broke 1,000 years of peace. The Vortok Empire, ancient, proud, and feared, had finally done it. They had declared war on the galaxy. On Earth, the reaction was unexpected. The glowing skyline of New Tokyo flickered with the latest updates. Banners of red and gold flashed across every screen. Vortok War Declaration. Humanity's worst threat is here. Panic, fear, hysteria. Or at least, that's what the media was hoping to sell. Then President Lena Reyes appeared on the main holoscreen, her expression calm, almost too calm for the occasion. Behind her, a flag of humanity, half Earth, half stars, hung proudly in the background. As the news anchor read off the list of Vortok demands, a sarcastic smile tugged at her lips. "We've been bored for centuries," she said, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "And now we're finally going to get a little excitement. Thanks for volunteering as target practice, Vortok. We'll be sure to send you a thank you card when this is over." Her words echoed in the halls of government buildings, across media channels, and into homes across the planet. It was the sound of 1,000-year-old peace crumbling under the weight of humanity's smug arrogance. But it wasn't just arrogance. It was something more. A promise. A warning. The universe had spent far too long forgetting who Earth was. In the heart of the Pentagon, high-level officers exchanged stunned glances. "Is she serious?" one muttered. Another chuckled. "She's serious. Trust me, you saw what happened with those colony raiders 2 years ago. If there's one thing you don't want to do, it's underestimate humans." In orbit, the United Earth Fleet was already buzzing to life. Every soldier, every commander knew what had to be done. The Vortok had made the first move. And now Earth would remind them why they'd been quiet for so long. General Kai Hartman stood on the bridge of the Dominion, the flagship of the human fleet. His eyes glinted with the kind of quiet determination that came only from years of waiting for a moment like this. "Have the Vortok sent anything else?" he asked, his voice steady. "No," replied his tactical officer. "Just the war declaration. They're already mobilizing, though. We'll have the first wave on our doorstep within days." Hartman smirked. "Let them come." In the streets below, the citizens of Earth didn't feel the panic that the rest of the galaxy might have expected. They felt invincible. Shops and markets were already selling new T-shirts with slogans like "Alien Stomper" and "I survived the Vortok War." Kids played outside, pretending to be soldiers, waving cardboard guns, and mimicking battle cries. They had no idea what was coming, only that they were ready. And in the silence that followed, humanity began to prepare, not with dread, but with anticipation. The Vortok had underestimated humanity, and now their mistake was about to cost them. At the edge of the galaxy, the human colony of New Albion sat peacefully under a purple sky, oblivious to the warships that loomed just beyond the distant horizon. The settlers here were simple people, farmers, engineers, and families, but even they knew that peace was fragile. When the Vortok warships entered the system, their massive shadows darkened the entire planet, and when the first attack came, they struck hard. Hundreds of Vortok ships, sleek and deadly, descended toward the planet's surface. They had come to make an example of the humans, one swift and overwhelming blow to break the spirit of Earth's colonies. But the humans were ready. On the ground, Commander Liam O'Connor paced through the makeshift command center, his face bathed in the cold glow of monitors. Sweat beaded on his forehead, but his hands were steady. Behind him, soldiers strapped on old military gear, armor once designed for peacekeeping, now repurposed for war. The sounds of power tools clanking against armor echoed through the room. "Time to turn the tables," O'Connor muttered, then spoke louder to his team. "This is our home. We're not letting them have it." Outside, the Vortok had begun their descent. Blinding flashes of energy cracked through the sky as their ships opened fire. Buildings were leveled in an instant, and firestorms lit up the horizon. But instead of retreating, the humans rallied. In the distance, the Sentinel defense cannon, a civilian project-turned-military weapon, hummed to life, its towering barrel aimed squarely at the incoming fleet. It wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. But it was enough. Target locked. A voice crackled through O'Connor's comm. Firing in 3, 2. The ground shook as the cannon fired. A blinding beam of concentrated energy erupted from the Earth, cutting through the lead Vortok ship with a roar that sent shockwaves across the planet. The alien vessel was split in half, disintegrating into 1,000 burning pieces. The sight was something no one had ever expected. A simple colony with a single weapon, tearing apart a Vortok warship like paper. The Vortok fleet hesitated. A ripple of panic spread through their ranks. But it was too late. Humans had already shown their claws. "Get to the dropships. We'll bring them the fight," O'Connor barked. His soldiers scrambled toward the launch bays, their rifles at the ready. As they stormed out, the ground quaked again. This time, the Vortok retaliated, dropping shock troops onto the surface with brutal precision. They were warriors, genetically enhanced for strength and ruthlessness. But the humans had something else: ingenuity. The first Vortok soldier landed in a field of twisted metal and wreckage. But instead of finding civilians cowering in fear, he found a battle. A small group of humans, armed with makeshift flamethrowers and explosive charges, attacked with the fury of cornered animals. The Vortok soldier turned his weapon toward them, but never fired. A homemade grenade exploded in his chest, and the last thing he saw was the wild, triumphant grin of a human soldier. Across the battlefield, the tide had turned. The Vortok fleet was in chaos, their ground troops shattered by human ingenuity and fierce resistance. Every move the Vortok made, every attack they launched, was met with laughter, with screams, and with fire. The Vortok general, watching from a distant command ship, transmitted a final desperate message across the galaxy. "We have made a grave error," he said, his voice trembling. "The humans, they smile when they bleed." The news of humanity's unexpected victory over the Vortok spread like wildfire across the galaxy. But instead of fear or respect or even a quiet resolve, the reaction from Earth was laughter. In the United Earth Senate, a holographic map of the galaxy shimmered in the center of the room. The room was tense with concern. The Vortok Empire had been humiliated, but no one expected them to just sit back and take it. Senators whispered, checking their screens and monitors, tracking the Vortok response. And yet, when President Lena Reyes appeared on the massive holoscreen in the center of the room, her expression was anything but serious. "Good morning, Galaxy," she said with a grin that spread from ear to ear. "We just wanted to thank the Vortok for the lovely light show over New Albion. Seriously, it was spectacular, reminded me of fireworks back on Earth. In fact, we're thinking of putting out a new line of commemorative shirts. I survived the Vortok War. First Blood Edition. What do you think?" Her words echoed in every communication channel, every terminal across Earth and beyond, as citizens in the streets paused to watch her speech. On a giant screen in central New York, a hologram of the president stood with her arms wide, laughing as though it were all one big joke. But to the people of Earth, it wasn't a joke. It was a declaration of something they hadn't realized they'd been waiting for. Something old, something wild. The Vortok High Command, meanwhile, was in turmoil. Huddled in their dimly lit war room, the once proud generals of the Empire were seething with rage. "We've been mocked," snarled General Nurkal, the highest military commander of the Vortok fleet, his hand clenched around his terminal. "They dare to laugh at us." "Don't underestimate them," warned Commander Velour, an experienced tactician. "They have something we've never seen before, but that is also their weakness. Their humanity, it's unpredictable. We are warriors. They are something else." Nurkal scowled. "We will crush them in due time. We will make them pay." But across the stars, humanity's response was simple, more jokes, more memes. In the streets of New Paris, a group of young adults held up a banner that read, "Vortak, check the box for first contact. Or is it war? Your call." It was everywhere. The hum of laughter echoed through the galaxies, infecting even the non-human species who watched with a mix of confusion and awe. In a Vortak-controlled system, the smug humans were already there, delivering another message to the Galactic Council. Ambassador Juna Lee, an unassuming woman with wild, curly hair and a smile that could disarm anyone, stood before a massive projection screen. She could barely hold back her grin. "Greetings, esteemed representatives of the galaxy," she began with mock cheer. "As you can see, the human response to the Vortak's rather rude interruption of our peace has been a bit overwhelming. We do apologize for the inconvenience, but fear not, we're still here to play nice. If any of you need help, I don't know, adjusting your war plans, just let us know. We're good with literally anything." There was a beat of silence, then a ripple of shocked, uncomfortable laughter from across the galaxy. What could anyone say to that? What could anyone do? While humanity, not a single ship lost, had already taken the first round, it was clear. The game had just begun, and no one, least of all the Vortak, had any idea what they were about to face next. The Black Moon Fortress was a symbol of the Vortak Empire's dominance, a massive, impenetrable station floating in the darkness of space. Its towering spires, cloaked in shadow, were a monument to the Vortak's pride, a reminder to the galaxy that they ruled with iron claws. But humanity was about to teach them the price of arrogance. At the United Earth Fleet's command center, Admiral Kara Storm stood before the holomap, a storm of thoughts in her mind. Her ships were ready, but this mission was a gamble, a direct strike on the Vortak's heart. The Black Moon was their most fortified stronghold, a place even the most battle-hardened commanders feared. "Ready the fleet," Admiral, her second-in-command, Commander Dax Harper, said, his voice steady. "We'll show them why you don't mess with humans." Storm gave a tight nod, but there was no fear in her eyes. There was only the cold fire of someone who knew what they were about to do. Initiate Operation Pyre. Out in the dark expanse of space, the Dominion, Earth's flagship, led the charge. A fleet of human warships followed, their engines glowing bright as they moved into position. Each vessel a masterpiece of human ingenuity and raw power. The Vortak had underestimated humanity's ability to fight with precision. Now they would see just how deadly they could be. "Admiral, the Vortak fleet is responding," reported the communications officer. "They're massing for defense." Storm glanced at the incoming wave of Vortak ships, their menacing forms emerging from the shadow of the Black Moon. The Vortak had brought their full might. Thousands of ships, each armed to the teeth. But the human fleet didn't flinch. "Let them come," Storm said, her voice as calm as a storm before the thunder. "We're not running. We're not hiding. We're here to end this." The battle began in a deafening roar of energy blasts and plasma fire. Vortak ships moved with military precision, sending a barrage of laser fire toward the human fleet. But the humans were ready. The Dominion soared through the chaos, weaving between explosions like a dancer in a storm. On board, Storm watched the carnage unfold, her eyes sharp, calculating every move. Her orders were simple: cripple the Black Moon's defenses and bring the fight to their doorstep. "Target the outer turrets," Storm barked. "All ships, concentrate fire." The fleet responded in unison. Massive energy beams ripped through space, slicing through the Vortak defense grid. The first explosions were deafening, blinding flashes of light that sent shockwaves through the Black Moon's hull. A secondary explosion erupted, and then another. The fortress shook violently as if it were alive, a creature gasping for air. But the real show was just beginning. As the Vortak scrambled to defend their fortress, Commander Dax Harper led a squadron of human bombers straight into the heart of the Black Moon. Guided by precision strikes and human ingenuity, they launched their payload, a series of bombs, each one designed to collapse the fortress from the inside. The Black Moon trembled as the bombs detonated in rapid succession, tearing through its core like an unstoppable wave. The explosions were like thunder in space, and as the final bomb detonated, a massive fireball erupted from the Black Moon's core, lighting up the entire star system. A massive cheer erupted from the fleet. The Vortok had been dealt a blow they would never recover from. Admiral Storm watched the devastation unfold, a grim smile crossing her face. "That's for New Albion," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the commotion. The galaxy would never forget the sight of the Black Moon burning, a symbol of humanity's might, a beacon to every species that the age of complacency was over. The Vortok Empire was wounded. Its pride had been shattered, and its military power was in disarray. The destruction of the Black Moon had sent shockwaves through their ranks, but there was still one thing the Vortok had left, a weapon they had never used before, hidden in the darkest corner of their territory. Humanity had made its mark on the galaxy, but it wasn't over yet. The Vortok had one final card to play, and Earth had no idea what was coming. In the heart of the United Earth Fleet, Admiral Kara Storm stood on the command bridge of the Dominion, her eyes locked on the holographic display before her. The battle was far from over. Vortok warships were retreating, regrouping, and yet there was something off. A chill had settled over the fleet. "Admiral, we've detected something," reported Lieutenant Jace Carter, his voice tense. "A massive energy signature. It's coming from the Vortok Prime system. It's unlike anything we've ever seen." Storm's heart skipped a beat. Vortok Prime, the beating heart of the Empire. If they were bringing out their final weapon, now was the time to act. "Prepare the fleet for warp jump," Storm ordered. "We're going straight for Vortok Prime." The engines of the Dominion roared to life, the massive ship tearing through space with the rest of the fleet in tow. For hours, they traveled in silence, the tension palpable in the air. As they approached the Vortok homeworld, the scale of the planet was breathtaking. Towering mountains, vast deserts, and cities that stretched far into the horizon. But all of it was overshadowed by a dark, looming shape. In orbit around the planet was a colossal structure, the Forge, a weapon so powerful it could obliterate entire star systems. The Vortok had kept it hidden for centuries, waiting for the perfect moment to unleash it. The Dominion dropped out of warp, its shields powering up instantly. Every ship in the fleet was ready for the worst, their weapons primed, their crews tense. "Admiral," Carter's voice cracked over the comm. "The Forge is activating. It's aiming at Earth." The realization hit like a slap. The Vortok weren't just trying to fight. They were ready to erase humanity from existence. In the distance, the Forge's core began to glow a deep, violent red, pulsing with energy. It was a weapon that could destroy Earth in one shot. "We're not letting them get away with this," Storm said, her voice calm but fierce. "Prepare to engage. Full power to forward shields. We're going in." Without hesitation, the fleet surged forward, its weapons unleashing a barrage of fire toward the Forge. The Vortok didn't hesitate either. Massive plasma beams erupted from their ships, cutting through the void with devastating precision. Admiral Storm gritted her teeth. The battle for survival had just reached its peak. Humanity had faced the Vortok's best, and now they were about to face their worst. The Dominion dodged an incoming blast, weaving through a minefield of debris. The skies above Vortok Prime were alive with the flash of battle. But there was no turning back. The Forge had to be destroyed. "Target their central core," Storm ordered, her voice filled with resolve. "We take that down, we end this war." The ships of the United Earth Fleet maneuvered with unrelenting precision, their weapons focusing on the heart of the Vortok weapon. For every blast that missed, another found its mark, but time was running out. As the Forge's energy reached a fever pitch, the Dominion fired its last, most powerful salvo, a single shot aimed directly at the heart of the Forge. The galaxy held its breath. The shot connected, and then everything exploded. The explosion that shook the forge reverberated through the cosmos, the blast a brilliant burst of light that consumed the entire Vortok flagship. The shockwave reached out like a massive hand, scattering debris across the dark expanse of space. It was a sight to behold, a symbol of humanity's triumph over an enemy that had once seemed invincible. On the bridge of the Dominion, Admiral Kara Storm stood frozen, staring at the fading glow of the explosion. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she dared not breathe a sigh of relief. The battle wasn't over. Not yet. "Report," Storm barked, her voice sharp. "Admiral," Lieutenant Jace Carter said, his fingers flying over the controls. "The forge has been neutralized. The Vortok ships are retreating. We've crippled their central fleet, but there's more coming in from their secondary lines. We're not out of the woods yet." A cold knot formed in Storm's stomach. The Vortok were relentless, and even though their most powerful weapon had been destroyed, they still had the numbers to cause serious damage. But this time, the humans weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for something more. "We hold the line," Storm said, her voice unwavering. "All ships, form up. We're not letting them escape." Across the fleet, the human warships regrouped, their damaged hulls creaking but steadfast. The Vortok fleet, battered but not broken, moved into formation once more. But now, they were the ones on the defensive. The tide had turned. Back on Earth, the people had already begun to celebrate. Holographic images of the explosion, the destruction of the forge, played across screens and billboards. In the streets of New London, people cheered, their eyes bright with hope. The war had reached its peak, and they were standing at the edge of victory. But victory was not just a moment of celebration. It was a promise that no one, no enemy, no force in the galaxy would ever again dare to threaten humanity. The battle, after all, had only just begun. On the surface of Earth, President Lena Reyes stood before a massive crowd, the cheers of her people echoing around her. "We didn't just win," she said, her voice amplified for the world to hear. "We showed them who we are. We showed them what it means to be human. And now the Vortok will learn what happens when you try to break us." The crowd erupted in applause, but Reyes' face remained solemn. The war wasn't over, not by a long shot. Back in space, the Dominion pressed on, its guns firing once more as the Vortok scrambled to regroup. The enemy ships, though numerous, were losing their cohesion. The United Earth Fleet had become an unstoppable force, a symbol of humanity's resilience. "Admiral," Carter said, his voice softer now, as if he were still processing the enormity of what had just happened. "We've broken their lines. The galaxy is ours for the taking." Storm nodded, her eyes hard with determination. "We're not done yet," she said, her voice as fierce as the fires of battle. "We're not just fighting for Earth anymore. We're fighting for everyone who's ever been oppressed, for every species that's ever been afraid of the Vortok." And with that, the Dominion led the fleet forward, its engines roaring with renewed fury. The battle was far from over, but for the first time in a long while, humanity could see the light at the end of the tunnel. The Vortok had made their mistake, and now the universe would know what it meant to face the might of Earth. The Dominion sailed through the black void of space, a lone titan in the quiet aftermath of battle. The hum of the ship's engines was the only sound, a steady rhythm that filled the bridge, now eerily calm after the chaos of the previous hours. The Vortok fleet had been shattered, but the silence that followed was deafening. Admiral Kara Storm stood at the helm, her eyes fixed on the stars ahead. There was victory, yes, but it felt hollow. "Admiral," Lieutenant Carter's voice broke through the stillness. "We've picked up an encrypted transmission. It's from Vortok Prime. It's old." Storm turned, her brow furrowing. "Old?" Carter nodded, his face pale as he worked at the controls. "It's from Tarnak, the Vortok leader who oversaw the creation of the forge. The message is centuries old, some kind of final order. The word hung heavy in the air. Tarnak had been a legend, a name whispered in fear across the galaxy, the mind behind the Vortak's most terrifying weaponry. His death had marked the beginning of the end for the Empire. But now, his shadow loomed once more. "Play it," Storm ordered, her voice tight. The room darkened as the holographic projection flickered to life. A figure in military garb, weathered by time and scars, appeared in the center of the bridge. Tarnak's eyes glowed with an eerie fire, his expression cold and calculating. To the Vortak Empire's future leaders, the message began. "If this transmission reaches you, the galaxy has once again risen against us. But fear not, for I have prepared the ultimate weapon, hidden beneath the surface of Vortak Prime. Should the Empire fall, this weapon shall rise again and burn all who dare defy us." Storm's pulse quickened. The Vortak weren't just militarily strong, they were relentless. A weapon, buried on their homeworld, waiting for the right moment to resurface. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. The image flickered again, Tarnak's eyes narrowing. "If you are hearing this, then you are the last. But remember, no matter what the humans believe, we are not yet defeated. The last card will be played when they least expect it. The Empire cannot die." The transmission ended, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. The bridge crew exchanged uneasy glances, their unease palpable. Tarnak's words hung in the air, like a ghost they couldn't escape. "This changes everything," Carter muttered. Storm didn't respond immediately. Her mind raced, working through the implications of Tarnak's message. If there was one thing she knew, it was that the Vortak were nothing if not persistent. But a weapon buried on Vortak Prime. That was a threat they couldn't ignore. "Prepare the fleet for a secondary strike," Storm said, her voice firm. "We're going to Vortak Prime." "But Admiral," Carter hesitated, "the Forge is gone. We've beaten them." "No," Storm's voice cut through the uncertainty. "There's something worse, something older. We've underestimated them before. We won't make that mistake again." The Dominion shifted into motion once more, its engines roaring to life as the fleet gathered behind it. They had won the battle, but the war was far from over. The shadows of the past had returned, and humanity was about to face its greatest challenge yet. As the ships headed toward Vortak Prime, Storm's eyes narrowed. This time, they weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting to end a war that had been centuries in the making. And she wasn't about to let the Vortak have the last laugh. The fleet hovered just outside the gravitational pull of Vortak Prime, the planet looming in the distance, dark and silent. It was as if the planet itself held its breath, waiting for the storm to come. Admiral Kara Storm stood at the front of the Dominion's command bridge, her gaze fixed on the desolate surface of the planet below. The message from Tarnak still echoed in her mind. The last card will be played when they least expect it. The Vortak Empire had always been a force of relentless power and cunning, but now it seemed their final weapon, buried deep within the planet, was the key to their last stand. Whatever it was, humanity had no choice but to face it head-on. "Admiral, we've arrived," Lieutenant Carter said, breaking the tense silence. He was standing at his station, his hands moving quickly over the controls. Storm nodded, her jaw tight. "Prepare a ground assault team. We're going down to the surface." "We're going in?" Carter asked, surprise in his voice. "I've seen what these monsters can do," she said, her eyes hard. "If there's one thing we've learned, it's that they'll stop at nothing to win. We end it here, today." The decision was final. The fleet had already engaged with the remaining Vortak forces in orbit, but the real fight would be fought on the ground. The Dominion was already descending, cutting through the atmosphere of Vortak Prime with the precision of a blade. The battle was now personal. As the Dominion touched down in a barren valley, the ground shook. A storm of dust and rock erupted around the ship as it landed. The atmosphere here was thick with the smell of sulfur, the air heavy and oppressive. Storm's boots hit the cracked, blackened earth, the sound of the impact echoing in the stillness. Her heart raced as she surveyed the desolate landscape. The war was about to come to a devastating conclusion. A group of human soldiers, their faces set in grim determination, followed her down the ramp. These were the best, elite fighters, handpicked for their skill and courage. But even they seemed uneasy in the shadow of what lay ahead. The ground trembled again, this time with more force. The earth cracked, and out of the deep fissure, something emerged. A massive, armored structure began to rise. The weapon Tarnak had promised, a terrifying monolith of steel and energy, pulsing with dark power. It towered over them, its silhouette cutting against the dim sky like a harbinger of doom. "Admiral," Carter said, his voice a whisper of disbelief. "What is that?" Storm didn't answer immediately. She could only stare at the monstrosity that loomed before them, the culmination of everything the Vortak had worked for. A weapon so powerful, it could turn the tide of an entire galaxy. "We stop it here," she said finally, her voice low, steely. "We end this now." The soldiers around her readied their weapons, their eyes steely with resolve. This was the moment of truth. This was humanity's last stand against a force that had nearly destroyed everything they'd fought for. With one final, determined glance at her team, Storm issued the command, "Move out." The human soldiers advanced, their boots thundering across the cracked earth, closing in on the weapon. The battle that had raged across the stars now came down to this, the fight for the future of humanity, for the chance to forge a galaxy that could finally stand united in peace. And Storm, leading the charge, was ready to see it through to the end.